Welcome to the Feel Good Lab podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Gresh. Join me as we bring together the brightest minds in health and wellness, covering topics from sleep and nutrition to exercise and mindfulness. Our goal is to give you actionable advice to optimize your health and ultimately to feel good. So, welcome to another episode of the Feel Good Lab podcast. And today we have a really special guest, Becky Montrone. And the reason that Becky is so special, for one, it's all the things we're going to talk about that you do in the day-to-day, Becky, and I can't wait to get into that. But honestly, for us, you're so special to us because you are so instrumental to the development of our core products. And, we've always looked up to you in the work that you do up in Keene. You're one of the best herbalists we've ever met. And so we're really honored to sit here today and just get a little bit of insight into some of the work that you do, some of the patients you help, and some of the advice that you might have to some of our listeners, how they can just live a healthier, more well-balanced life. So thank you, Becky, for joining us.
Thank you, Ryan, for asking me. I'm very, very thrilled to be here. And we go back quite a ways because my dad, E. George Wrench, my late father, was a compound pharmacist, and one of his, I call them the Peter, James, and John, his three inner circle compound pharmacists. Your father, Gene Gresh, is one of them. And so I've had a lot of good times powwowing with Gene about natural health. We've gone to conferences together, and so just very like-minded. Yes.
Totally. And actually, that's exactly where I wanted to start. Your dad was one of my favorite people. I only got a chance to spend a couple of days with him, but he was actually the first person that got my dad to allow me to have my first beer. And I'm sure you're not surprised by that, because one of the cool things about him, incredible human being, what a great heart he had, but he was willing to break the rules and push the boundaries a little bit. He really had this mindset from what I experienced was the rules are made by somebody else, and I'm here to, push and the limits and learn new things and expand our possibilities and capabilities. And I see, I'm sure you took a lot of that away from him. So how did he play into your role as what you do now? And what did you learn from him as you started your career?
Okay, that's a good question. So my dad, being a compound pharmacist, and as you know, this pharmacy tends to be one of those professions that runs in families, like generation to generation.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that. We see that in your family.
Totally.
We see that. Yeah, we see that. Definitely my dad, my grandfather. In fact, I've got a bottle of his cough syrup, my grandfather, Medical Hall, my dad's dad. And that goes back to the prescription number was 100 and the phone number was something like 2 or something like that, And somebody found it when they were cleaning out their father's stuff after he passed. And we still have it. It's got a little bit of syrup in there. And I keep daring myself to take a little taste, but I'm not going to. I'm sure it had cocaine in it, probably. Back at that point in time. But so my dad, I think people like us come by DNA. I just think there's something in us that drives us to find a solution to problems in this area of life. So I did consider becoming a pharmacist myself, but at that point in time, I really didn't want to go through the ropes of counting out Lipitor pills and things like that. So I wanted to do mine a different way, but it was actually my mother who got us really all into natural health and supplements and things like that. That was her whole thing. So it's really a combination of both of my parents. What really made me excited about this when I was 16, I read my mother's copy of Adele Davis was a nutritionist biochemist. And she wrote a book. She wrote many books, but this particular book was called Let's Have Healthy Children. And in this book, she talks about her work with ranchers and how ranchers paid so much more attention to prenatal nutrition for their stock, much more attention than pregnant women did.
Wow.
and because their livelihood depended on it. And so this whole book was about nutrients and how you can change the future of your child, preconception and pregnancy, by what you are ingesting and the things you're doing. I was taking so many supplements. People thought I was going to give birth to a monster, because of all of these pills I was taking and things like that. But it really excited me because I understood that we have so much more control than we think we do when it comes to our health and the health of our children, if we know how to do things right. And so that's kind of one of my big things. And then just having the inquisitive, like somebody has a problem, what kind of a product can we make for that? And that would be like what we did with the pain cream, that kind of basis. Well, what are the herbs that we use for inflammation? What are they? And how can that be incorporated into a topical product? Something like that.
I love that. And one of the things, we're kind of transitioning our business. One of the things we believe in is it's really about understanding the problem and not so much being set on the solution, because there's many solutions and it's always ever changing as you get more knowledge. And so for us, we're moving more in the direction of really what you and my dad do now, which is it's not just one thing. It's not just the pain cream. It's not just the supplements. It's not just the diet and lifestyle. It's oftentimes a combination of all of those things brought together. So let's shed a little bit of light on what you do day to day. So you are a certified holistic practitioner, right? And an herbalist.
Right. My degree is in holistic nutrition. So that's my basis. I'm an herbalist and I've studied herbalism. I've gone to many conferences and I've taken classes and all of this kind of stuff. But again, that was just kind of, I don't have a degree in herbalism and I don't need one. It's kind of more a matter of doing it. And so I do make a lot of different formulas for different purposes. So I have like anti-inflammatory, I have botanical lax for, I have healthy heart formulas. I have formulas for anxiety, sleep, all kinds of things. It's hard to even begin to mention them all. But again, it starts with what is the problem? Oh, for instance, I had a mom come in this morning and she has a 2-year-old who has had severe constipation his whole life long. And the doctors just want to give him Miralax. Well, Miralax is really not a healthy pharmaceutical to be taken for a number of reasons. And but everything they've tried, and I've had him use chewable for kids, magnesium citrate, because he gets the urge to go, but his stool is hard. So we found a product today. I had her sit with me. I don't like to mix products for a 2-year-old, herbs, myself, unless I spend a lot of time making sure they're okay for the child. So I found like this really cool product that online that we ordered for him and I'm hoping is going to work. So again, it's like, come on, we've got to be able to find something that will work that isn't Miralax. And so this child can have a pain-free, normal childhood. So that kind of thing. I told my dad, I said, I think it's kind of interesting because our backgrounds, our ethnic backgrounds are Irish and German. And I said, I think what makes us good at what we do is that we have that analytical part that we get from the German side of things. And then the Irish kind of gives us that intuition, that feel. And I think that that's super important for health practitioners. You can have, you can be a doctor with, a PhD or whatever, in medicine, but if you don't have it, like with everything else, if you don't have it, it doesn't really work that well. So it's that kind of it factor. So it takes the science making sure you've got your science right. And then it takes the intuition to kind of figure out what to do from person to person.
Yeah, and even on top of the intuition, there's almost one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is this empathy, bedside manner side to medicine. In the conventional model, you really don't have a lot of time. And one of my beliefs is that whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're often right. And giving people hope and sitting with them and listening. I know you had answered some of these interview questions, right, that we talked about. Like, I really loved how you answered them because you're like, honestly, I don't necessarily have all the answers. I listen and then I research and I figure out and I work with individual people because everybody is unique, right?
Exactly, precisely. And people are different too in what they can do, what they will do. Some people don't swallow pills. You need to find something for them that's a liquid, or you need to find something that is affordable for them. That might not be the high end of what you want to do, but you got to make it work. You also have people. I had a woman, this is a perfect example. She's like, I don't cook. I microwave frozen meals. And now I've been told I can't have carbs or sugar. And I can only have like this very meager amount of sodium a day because of my blood pressure. And I had a mini stroke and all of this kind of stuff. Right. So, I mean, here I am trying to find her. I don't think people should use the microwave for a number of reasons, but I think it's very important to avoid microwave cooking. But I'm not going to teach her to be barefoot and pregnant and learn and buy cookbooks and start cooking her meals. She has a full-time job. She comes home. So I'm finding for her things that are healthy, microwavable, frozen meals from different providers that are low sodium, low what she needs. Because even if she's going to try to start cooking more in that way, she needs to eat in the meantime. So it really depends on the person and who are they? Are you going to recreate them to be a clone of you, Becky? No, you're not. You have to do something that works for the individual and something that they can comply with. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, compliance. That's another thing. We're moving into this direction of helping people with their lifestyle and understanding what foods are more beneficial. But one of the things we learned is if they don't comply and stick with it, then all that data is irrelevant. So it's really helping them stay accountable and make the progress. And there's a lot of challenges in that. You know, we self-sabotage quite a lot when it comes to
Yes.
changing who we are. And so that's, you know, we're learning it on the fly as we start to move the business in this direction. But I'm certain that you've had experiences because you've been doing this for so long where you understand that sticking with it and the accountability and helping them and giving them the hope is pretty much most of the battle. You can make up whatever concoction you want that could be amazing, but if they don't use it in the right way and aren't able to
Yeah.
stick with it, then it doesn't really matter.
I think a point you made earlier on too about the empathy and saying you can do it is that placebo effect. And placebo effect is real. If you, as a practitioner, and I learned this in school, if you as a practitioner believe that this is going to help that person, and you truly believe it, and you say it, it does make a difference. You know, as a person thinks, how we think changes too. So it's not like you're lying to somebody, but you are confident, and your confidence does make a difference. And that's been proven. Um,
Totally. I
yeah,
actually love this topic. In the early days, I'd be petrified. I'd go to these different business meetings or whatever, and the placebo effect would come up, and people would like crucify me, like, "Oh, your product doesn't work." Now, what I've begun to feel about it is it's one of the most repeatable things that we have in science.
yeah,
Repeatable. Almost every clinical study that's ever done has a placebo effect accompanying it. And so now we want to lean in because, you know, when we look at chronic pain as an example, there's 100 million people in the United States. That's almost a third of our adult population that are in chronic pain. And two-thirds of those people don't think anything will ever work. So if they feel that way, there's a piece of that that's leading to the worse and worse situation we're seeing in the pain crisis, the opioid epidemic, the oral NSAIDs like Tylenol, ibuprofen, and the overuse of them. It's all, in my opinion, we need better solutions. We need to look at the holistic piece and a lot of the stuff that you look at, not just say, here's one product, it's the diet and the other things. But there is hope out there for people.
oh, definitely. And that's the way we work here. We try to get, functional medicine is get at the root of what's going on. So, for example, we'll use, so somebody comes in with, and they've got one of their complaints is they got, say, chronic knee pain,
Hmm.
right? I'm certainly going to send them out with a tube of, of the pain cream, the Feel Good Lab pain cream, right? Natural pain relief. But that's I'm hoping they don't need it for very long because we're going to find out why they have the knee pain. And we might be giving them a good whopping dose of MSM, organic sulfur powder, every day. So they're starting to do better with their cartilage and their connective tissue. And they're getting that anti-inflammation action. And so it's the same thing if somebody comes in, okay, I know we talked about constipation already, but you can go pick up X-Lax, or you can use our herbal botanical lax. But the idea is, why is this happening? And let's get rid of it. So we don't need to, I don't care whether it's natural or not. We want to remedy the problem. We want to as close to the source as possible, when possible.
I love that. I have this vision. It's almost crazy and counterintuitive, but I think it's one of the reasons that we will succeed in the long run. I want to be the first ever product-centric company that actually wants you off of our products. Because I believe that there is a solution to the root cause. And I almost see a future where the Feel Good Lab is more of a media company, where we're introducing people like yourself that can help people understand that by getting to the root cause of their problem, we don't need the daily remedies. Yes, you might stub your toe, hurt yourself, and need a product like ours later on in your life. But the idea is, when you need to take something every single day, like most of our conventional medical model when it comes to chronic disease, you get stuck in the rat race. You build up a tolerance. It doesn't work as good anymore over time. And the side effects can be catastrophic oftentimes.
Yes, very good point. My dad, you mentioned that. My dad would make like a little container of something and charge like $49 for it. One time somebody said to him, "How can this little container be $49? And he said, "Because you'll never need another one. You'll never need to buy another one." You know? So yes, and that's the way I practice as a holistic practitioner. Is I don't want my people to be dependent on me. My biggest passion is education. Sharing, people go out with folders of stacks of this, or I send them a mazillion attachments on the things I've recommended for them, because it's so exciting when you see what the potential is and why we're doing this, right? And then it educates that person, so they become more and more confident about making their own health decisions. They're not running to me so work with people, we'll see them and follow up, as long as they want to, but we want to give them the tools and give them the knowledge that then, piques their curiosity, and they start doing research on their own and looking into things too. So it's really fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. And obviously you can tell you're in your passion, like you love what you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's empowering, and it's that's what we want to do. We just want to empower people, and we're doing it. So that's cool.
My next question, I think, is a little bit of a loaded one, because I have a feeling like you don't have an answer for it, but let's see where you take it. Because it sounds like you work with anybody that needs help. But what kind of clients do you work with and have the most success with?
Okay, so I seriously work with just about everything. I have a reputation for, when you're not getting results, go see Becky Montrone. And I'm not patting myself on the back, but that's just the way it is. So we do a lot of cancer. We have very good results with cancer. I do a lot of work with epigenetics, especially surrounding folate metabolism and methylation problems, which most people have and don't realize they have. And is the root of many, virtually, almost everything. So that's another topic, but we do a lot of that. So what I'll do is I'll have people who have already done, say, Ancestry.com or 23andMe. I easily tell them how to get their raw data downloaded, and I analyze that. Or if we're doing that, I always assume nobody methylates well, so I'm always careful with the nutrients out of consideration for that. And again, that's a big topic, but that's a very big thing. So we do a lot of depression, anxiety, OCD, eating disorder. We do a lot of psychiatric things, and are able to get people many times off medication, because the medications usually don't work because they're not targeted properly, and without this proper methylation process going on, the neurotransmitters that medications typically work with aren't made in abundance. They're not really supplied. So we do a lot that way. I do love working with people with children with attention deficit, hyperactivity, and it could be, on the spectrum or autism, that kind of thing. I love working with, I have this one guy who, he had a lot of disabilities, like developmental disabilities, but his mom came to see me when he was 29. And she said, every time he eats, he has to take opiate medication. She told me back when he was 6 years old, he had a twisted bowel, and they had to operate to fix that. And I'm wondering if he's creating scar tissue every time he eats. And I looked it up and I found that is possible. 1 week on the proteolytic enzyme serrapeptase, which digests fibrin, protein in the body that's useless and needs to go. He no longer needed that pain medication. He comes in, he's like 34. To this day, he comes in to pick up his serrapeptase. He only has to take 1 high potency a day, and he has no problems with that. It's really fun. So I use serrapeptase with, I like proteolytic enzymes for dissolving inflammation. We're talking a lot about inflammation today. I think we're going to be talking about, and also keeping the blood nice and thin. Okay, so digest extra fibrin, so we're not clotting, things like that. We have a lot of clotting concerns surrounding the recent illness everybody's familiar with, and also associated with the vaccines. So we can easily just say, hey, let's just make sure you're not going to be doing that. So that's really fun. I do a lot with autoimmune illnesses, and am often able to get people off their immunosuppressive things, using things that, again, are working by addressing the inflammation, such as plant sterols and sterolins. Balance the TH1, TH2, and shut out that inflammation, but without suppressing the immune system, just balancing it. And things like glutathione, things like that. Yeah.
Let's move into inflammation. It's definitely a huge topic. A lot of people don't, including me, really understand it. When you think about inflammation, how do you define it?
Well, I think it's interesting because I think usually when you talk about inflammation, people think pain.
Yes.
Right. So they're thinking, well, if I had inflammation, I would have pain. Not necessarily. Inflammation goes across everything. We're talking the brain. We're talking the cardiovasculature. We're talking all of the organs, really, of the body can be affected by inflammation. And a lot of that is due to free radical damage that we're getting from so many places. We're getting it in our food. We're getting it in the air we breathe, talking about our toxic food. Herbicides, pesticides, glyphosate, things like that. We're getting inflammation from our phones, from our electromagnetic fields and things like that. I have an Airs Tech 5G blocker. We don't have 5G in New Hampshire. I'm glad, and I hope we never do. But I have one that serves this whole part of our business space, and everything under. So, and then I've got similar on my phone, things like that. Things that people don't realize how much damage we are exposed to all the time, every day, living in our modern world. It's ridiculous. And so inflammation is involved in everything. It's very involved in things like Parkinson's, super involved in cancer, very involved in all neurodegenerative illnesses, such as Alzheimer's and things like that. So inflammation is a huge problem.
Yeah, and you sound just like my dad when he describes it. And one of the things that I think we're seeing, at least for me, I'm trying to understand, because I agree that a lot of these things are bad, but when you look at them individually, there's a lot of controversy around these topics. And one of the theories I have is it's not just one thing, like you said, it's everywhere. So it's a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. And then what it actually compiles in is when we look at the data, the output, we're seeing more diseases. We're seeing more children with adult diseases. Yes. We're seeing a lot of trends that tell us that there's definitely something happening and changing. And, a lot of the skeptics might push back and say, well, cell phones wouldn't be able to be used by everybody if they were safe. It's not as simple as that. And I think it's important to look at, if you can make, you don't need to cut out your cell phone use, right? Like you said. But if you can control and at least slightly reduce your exposure to pesticides, to certain things that are going to increase the inflammatory burden on your body, then inflammation isn't by itself bad. It's out of control inflammation that's bad. And
Oh,
all of these
inflammation.
things,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Inflammation, is important for healing.
Yes.
So I mean, inflammation has its place, but we're just really in a toxic environment. And we have, and so that's why I always say too, I mean, we can't all go move to our own island and grow our own food. So we have to be able to live in the modern world and protect ourselves. And that's why, using nutritional supplements and things are so foundational to what I do, because we have to address that from within. If we were all living in the Garden of Eden, we wouldn't need a single supplement. We'd all be fine, because there would be none of this stuff we're breathing. People don't really realize how much synthetic estrogen they're getting on a daily basis. And we're seeing a lot of problems from that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what are some of your favorite supplements? And I think the caveat here is everybody's unique. There is no one size fits all, like take curcumin and you're going to, relieve your inflammation. No. But the idea is to support a healthy inflammatory response, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your body knows how to do that. It's when it's in homeostasis, it can kind of fight these things on its own. What are some of your favorite supplements in the realm of inflammation support?
My favorite is glutathione, the acetylated form, acetyl L-glutathione. So glutathione for the listeners is a tripeptide made by all of our cells. Most of us don't make enough of it. That goes back to that whole methylation issue, because when we're methylating properly, that the great outcome is that we make glutathione. And glutathione is considered the miracle molecule. They did a study. It is the highest antioxidant, the highest anti-inflammatory and detoxifier, especially of toxic metals, aluminum, mercury, cadmium, things like that, but hugely anti-inflammatory. And then actually Dr. Frank Schallenberger, who uses high dose melatonin in his clinic for cancer, and we use high dose melatonin with people. That's actually what's in this container that I was, this is just pure melatonin powder. So one little level scoop like that is 60 milligrams of pure powder.
Whoa.
And Schallenberger says melatonin is the chief antioxidant. He said melatonin's here, glutathione's a close second, but melatonin also recycles glutathione. So glutathione and melatonin are highly anti-inflammatory. And this is why we find recommendations for both when it comes to things like inflammatory brain disease, such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, Lewy body dementia, things like that. And so I don't, like if somebody comes in and says, I've got inflammation in my knee, let's go back to that. I'm like, oh, gee, you need glutathione for that inflammation. I'm talking about systemic inflammation that we're all experiencing, and we don't feel that. It's there, but we don't feel it until all of a sudden we find out, I've got plaque patching up a problem in my artery. And, I have these things that was inflammation going on the whole time and I had no clue. So systemic inflammation, I think, is super important.
How do you think our food plays into the role of inflammation?
So we know, I just did a whole radio program and newsletter on food toxicity and things like that. And yes, it does. These things like glyphosate, the things they spray on food, and glyphosate is now kind of, we know how dangerous it is, but it's kind of like low on the totem pole with some of these other pesticides they're using and things like that. So these do cause free radical damage. So free radicals, okay, so oxidative stress, free radicals, oxidative stress, and it's the anti-inflammatories, the powerful anti-inflammatories that quench the free radicals. And, glutathione will do that without creating more free radicals. That can be a problem with some antioxidants as well. So anyway, I think if our food was pure, Yes, are there inflammatory foods? For some people, yes. Like we could talk about nightshade foods, tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, and potatoes, right? Because they contain solanine. For some people who have, especially if they have arthritis or something like that, it's a problem. But for a lot of people, it doesn't bother them at all. I can eat all of those things, but I remember one holiday I made a roasted eggplant dip. It was delicious, but I ate a lot of it, and I honestly did feel pain later on. And I was like, yeah, it was the solanine. It was in that. But most people don't eat that concentrated. So we have things like that. There are things in foods such as phytates that, if they're not broken down properly, can be inflammatory to some people. So they can sprout grains, legumes, and seeds and nuts, or as appropriate. I have like a chart I give people if they want to do that. Tells them how long to do each, or if it's not appropriate for something. But there are ways to kind of get around those things. Yeah.
Amazing. Before I get to my final question, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience? Anything on your mind that you've been, really thinking about?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've been talking about, basically what I do and how I work, and how, we work hard to get to the bottom of things and try to get it as close to right the first time. Yeah, it's very rewarding. I think it's much more rewarding than your average doctor these days. And I've had doctors tell me that. It's just like, oh my gosh, I have one woman is a doctor here in town, and I help her with her psoriatic arthritis. And she's like, I wish I could do what you do. There's no time for me to burn the midnight oil researching something, spending hours researching something for somebody. So it's very satisfying. It's very satisfying work.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we talk about. It's like we don't want to demonize the conventional model. We empathize and sympathize. The doctors are doing the best they can, and it's really a lack of time. It's really hard. The system seems to be a bit overwhelmed, because I think that there's got to be a shift in our responsibility over our overall wellness. And I know my generation for certain, I hope, is starting to move in this direction. But we've grown up on McDonald's and this idea that food is an enjoyment versus a fuel, and the other things in our life and our sleep and this sort of stuff. And if we don't kind of go backwards and look at, like, you look at society 100, 200 years ago, I bet you they were probably happier than we were. It was a little simpler. And
oh yeah, even people who were poor, I'll have people in their 80s or 70s or 80s and stuff, and they'll talk about their families like having nothing, but they grew their own food. They had their own chickens. Because they didn't have a lot of money. They were having high quality meals. Mm-hmm. Even though it might have seemed, at the time, it didn't seem very glamorous or, a lot of fun. I will say, because I know that you're going to be doing fit testing for food inflammation.
Yep.
And I will say that we didn't used to have nearly as much problem with people with food sensitivities and allergies as we do now. And I won't go into the reasons. I know that that's the case, but that is the case. And it's too bad, because we're kind of destroying people's guts. And when people have inflammation in their gut, it can damage the intestinal wall. We end up with leaky gut. And so this is a problem that, unfortunately, we do have to deal with today. And then we do have a lot of things like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, mm-hmm. or celiac disease, things like that. And in those cases, I will recommend either the specific carbohydrate diet, or I have another one I found that is a combination of FODMAP and specific carbohydrate diet. And it kind of goes from green over to another color. So SCD and FODMAP, and then less this and less that. And people can kind of do that for a time anyway, to try to bring healing and bring that inflammation down, not hopefully as a diet for the rest of your life.
Yes.
But to get things under control and get that
And
information.
for the food inflammation test for us, this is a test we just launched last month, but I
Mhm.
have my results here from over 4 years ago. And this was pretty much, I would say, the most life-changing thing I've done for my health and wellness.
Yeah.
I knew that when I ate pizza, I didn't feel good. But it was one of those things of like, well, I don't necessarily know that. So I was okay with, I literally had pizza multiple times a week. It was my favorite food because, it tastes so good. Well, once I got the data back, right? So, like, the four plus reactions, which are the highest on my list, which were
Mhm.
cow's milk, casein, which is the protein in cow's milk, wheat, and gluten. That's
Oh, there you go.
there's my pizza.
There you
And
go.
the data allowed, because I finally got the results and now I really knew, it allowed me to cut it out. It allowed me to make
Yeah.
that lifestyle change. The other thing that I did, and I don't recommend this for everybody, but I started intermittent fasting because I found that my stomach was so upset all the time. I found that giving it more time to digest, it allowed it
Yeah.
to really heal. And so what's happened is I feel like it's healed itself. My
Wow.
brain fog, I mean, is gone. I have so much more energy. My stomach used to hurt me every single day of my life, and I just thought it was
Wow.
like part of living. And so this test really allowed me to just focus in on a couple of areas, and oftentimes it's not just one thing, but sometimes one thing can affect many things. And so
Yeah.
for me, cutting out gluten and dairy and moving to intermittent fasting over the last 4 years has really changed my life.
That's really marvelous and wonderful. I did mention in the writing I sent that a lot of people who have problems with those foods here in the United States, when they travel to Europe, okay, it's it's what we do to our food over here too. Even somebody was telling me Barilla pasta, okay, the brand Barilla in Italy is totally different than the Barilla pasta you get here. And so when I'm shopping for pasta, I always look for 100% durum semolina flour grown in Italy. Because, of course, we know about wheat belly, Bill, um, the guy, the doctor, the cardiologist who wrote that, and talking about how modern wheat has 7 times the gluten activity. So, yeah, I had a woman in just the other day, and she's like, if I had a piece of pizza, I would be so sick. But she goes, whenever we travel, I can eat pizza all I want when we go to Europe. And it's so interesting. I did have, my daughter did decide to do, our daughter is 34 now, and she decided to do some testing through
Yeah, yeah.
everlywell.com. And she did the women's health to get a baseline and thyroid, and that was all good. Then she decided to do the vitamin D and inflammation one, but because she got some kind of a deal. And then she did the food sensitivity one, and I was really glad she did, because I wondered if everybody's is going to come back with the typical
Mm.
ones, and eggs, dairy, gluten, wheat. And no, she had a very slight reaction to onions and a very slight reaction to egg white, and she tolerates those fine. But I
Yep.
was just glad to know that it wasn't coming back the same thing for everybody. So I think this type of testing that you're talking about and you're doing with a Feel Good Lab, I think is very reliable. I
Yeah.
wonder if you tested again,
I'm
if it
going to.
would, yeah, I'd be curious to see if things have healed so that maybe you're able to tolerate those things better.
Well, I know because I cheated last weekend and had some pizza. I did not feel good. And actually, it was even worse than before. And I think it's
Yeah.
because, but I do believe that I've healed. I had leaky gut, so we did do some other analysis to see
Oh,
if
okay.
I had some other issues. But I do believe that it was the gluten and the dairy. I didn't have a lot of dairy. It was mostly the gluten. I had gluten every day. I do
Yeah.
believe that that was the root cause for me. Um, but I am going to retest, and I'm very curious to see, kind of what shows up now because my body's in a much different state than it was 4 years ago.
Cool. Yeah.
And one of
That'd
the
be
cool things,
really
we love the Everywell test. They've really brought a lot of attention and awareness to this space. And so they measure the same IgG, which is immunoglobulin G reaction that we
yes.
do.
Instead of IgE. Yeah.
Instead of IgE, correct. IgE would be more for a food allergy,
Allergy.
which is an
Yeah.
immediate reaction, whereas the IgG can show up between a day and 2 weeks later. So that's where that inflammatory reaction can really wreak havoc, and you might not be able to tie it back to exactly what you ate. But
Good
what's
point.
Yeah, what's special about the partner we have in KBMO Diagnostics is that their chief medical officer he actually developed the at-home AIDS test. So he's been developing these sort of tests for many, many decades. And he found that there's a thing called complement protein C3D, that when that is also present with the IgG reaction, so you need two signals now. One is because we're looking at two signals, we get less false positives. So it lets us focus in on more of the culprits of inflammation.
Yeah.
But they found that with that complement protein present, it's between tenfold and 1,000-fold the inflammatory response. So the
Wow.
foods that show up in the test really allow us to, have less foods because people don't want to necessarily change their entire diet. You want to
Right.
really focus in on the one or two that are really the culprits. And so one of the things we loved and the reason we partnered with KBMO is that we felt like that test allowed us to be more actionable with the results.
Sure. It's really important. One of the things too, when people are celiac, they might go to great lengths because they absolutely have to avoid gluten, but just avoiding gluten does not decrease that inflammation called zonulin. You're
Yes.
probably familiar with zonulin. So that's why the specific carbohydrate diet, if used for a time, can stop. It's based on just a one molecule sugar, so a monosaccharide, no disaccharides, no polysaccharides, and so that stops feeding bacteria and fungi and quiets all that inflammation
Yeah.
down. And when you do that, then and the zonulin is that marker of inflammation that,
Yep.
yes, it comes down. So I hate when I'm working with people, even if it's cancer, I'm not big on special diets. I don't tell people if they want to lose weight, you got to go on a keto diet, or you got to do this, or you got to do that. I don't do that. I ask I ask people to stay away from processed food as much as possible, to eat healthy whole foods as much as possible, stay away from excess sugar, that kind of thing. But I'm not a proponent of any particular diet for everybody. And and so I think it's nice if people know what they like to eat, and if they
Yeah.
can do that in a more healthy way and still stick with what they like to eat, I'm all for that. You don't want to change people's life. People are so happy when they come here. She's going to tell me I can't drink that much, and I'm like, no. I said, if you want to drink that much, take some B1 before you take a drink, and it'll help stop that alcohol from turning to acetaldehyde, which is what does the damage. So find a way to get around it. I'm all for finding a way to cheat
Yep.
and do the things you like to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of zonulin, actually, our test measures zonulin. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah, we have three sizes. You can do a 22 food panel that looks at gluten, dairy, bananas, the core culprits. That does not include zonulin. But then our
Okay.
132 food panel, which is just a little bit more comprehensive, it includes zonulin, and so does our 176 food.
Nice. Okay. So people, I mean, if you're going to do that, you're going to find out what's going on with your inflammation
Hmm.
in all of that area. And we have a crisis of bowel problems. We just really do. And again, we've got a lot of damage that's happening to people, to their intestines. And we know digestion is really probably the root of good health is the gut.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a healthy gut, you're not healthy.
I've
You're
heard
not
this
well.
theory before, and it's kind of funny, but it's actually pretty serious. Like we have a tube, right, that you could argue isn't actually part of our body. And this tube, oftentimes, when you look at the science, is controlling everything. It's controlling our mood, it's controlling our brain, it's almost like these bacteria, these things that live in our gut, are
Mhm.
actually running the machine that is us.
Yes, exactly. The microbiome.
Hmm.
Yes, we are, and we need all of that. It needs to be in balance. It
Right.
needs to be, and so we have a lot. I use when I have people with things like colitis and Crohn's and IBS, but really inflammatory. We use again, glutathione is always shown to be low in the guts of people with those problems. Vitamin D is shown to be very low in those people. And we also find, I find that cannabinoids, CBD, works really well for getting rid of inflammation in the GI tract.
Yeah.
And so it's nice that we have tools, but it would be really nice if people didn't need them. in the
Totally.
first place. Yeah.
Totally, totally. Well, with that being said, my last question, we always like to end it with some sort of actionable advice for our listeners. There's a lot, I think you covered, there's a lot of actionable advice, but what are
And
some of
there's,
the low-hanging fruit for people, whether it be supplements or diet or etc.?
I'm going to tell you, I'm on a craze right now, and I haven't mentioned it at all, but you gave me the opportunity, Ryan.
Great.
Get yourself a mini trampoline and rebound for 10 minutes a day. It is a life changer. So rebounding is anti-gravity. So when you rebound, you are draining your lymph. You're getting rid of sluggish lymph fluid, right? Because of the valves in the upper thighs move. It's really easy on your body. So if you have problems with your knees or your back or something like that, but it also raises the white blood cell count. It increases the immune system, and it's the favorite exercise that NASA uses with its astronauts. And you need very little time. I was always an avid exerciser in my younger adult years, up until about, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago. And I just can't be bothered. I'm just like my father. He said, if he would much rather sit there and research than, he said, whenever I get the urge to exercise, I lie down until the feeling goes away. And I'm just like, I know I will not go back to doing anything that requires any amount of time. And I remembered about using the rebounder for people with cancer, right? Because it does make a difference. They recommend that people with cancer rebound about 5 minutes every waking hour if possible, but a frail person can sit on the rebounder and somebody can bounce behind them. It's the gentle bounce that cleanses and detoxifies. So you've got detoxification and all of your muscles. I feel like I've been to the gym and I spent 7 minutes on the rebounder this morning. I do push-ups on the bar while I'm bouncing. I use light weights. My abs are sore all the time. And I haven't done a crunch in 10 years, because everything freezes in that one moment as you come, everything just freezes. And so I'm just telling people, I have so many people doing this now, rebounding. And one guy I have who's a diabetic and he's type 2, but he's been on insulin for a while. He started doing this and his diabetic nurse had to keep lowering his insulin by 20 units because his blood sugar I'm telling you, it's great. Get yourself a mini trampoline. You don't need any time at all.
Type, right? You can go to Walmart, Target, just pick up a
just make sure you get one for, like, if you're really heavy, different ones have different weight limits. So make sure you get one that's appropriate for you. And I really do recommend getting the handle, not just for your balance. Balance really improves when you're rebounding anyway, but also because you can use it as part of like if you bounce and hold back like this, you can get a really good pull here. And I do push-ups on the bar while I'm bouncing. It's and just do it because you know what? You'll do it. It's fun. It boosts your mood, and it's short. So I know if I'm limited on time, if I even have 7 minutes, I'm not going to skip it.
I can't believe you went there. I never would have expected it, and I love it. And one of the people that I follow, especially recently, is Tony Robbins. And I was looking at some of the things that he does. Number one, he does a lot of cold exposure. He's big into biohacking.
Oh yeah, he's big into vagus nerve. Yeah.
He jumps on a trampoline all day, especially before he goes out on stage. He's jumping on his trampoline.
Okay, there you go. It is fantastic. It is so great. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Becky, how can people find you?
Okay, so you can find me on the internet. If you go to wondrousroots.org, WONDROUS roots.org. A lot of people think wondrous, and wondrous is a word too, but that would mean that the roots were wondering. What we are saying, the roots are wonderful. Yes. So wondrousroots.org. You can contact me there. Just go to contact. It comes to my private email. I'm the only person who sees those. You could give us a call on the phone, 603-439-2603.
Awesome. And is your radio show still live?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
I started in 2015 and I just renewed my contract for another year. And so we are on WKBKradio.com. And that is noon Eastern Standard Time on WKBKradio.com. And also, you can pick up former podcasts and newsletters if you go to wonderfruits.org and hit the radio tab on the navigation.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Becky, so much. It's great
Thank you for having me, Ryan. Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much.